Hello everyone, it's good to be here and to open the Bible together again. I want to open today to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15, and talk with us about bitterness. Now this will be a two-part study because I just can't get it all into the first session. But look at Hebrews 12 and verse 15. And I'll be in the NIV, and it says, "See to it that no one misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and to defile many." Bitterness. This is a biblical study of bitterness. And it has 7 parts to it. The first one is the definition. Bitterness. Our word comes from the Anglo-Saxon bitterness, and it's a combination of bitter, B-I-T-E-R, meaning bitter, B-I-T-T-E-R, and N-Y-S, ness, which means it's a state of being bitter. It's the quality, it's the territory of being sharp and acrid, sarcastic, distressed, grieved, or vexed in mind. So it's an awful state to be. The Bible deals with it a great deal, and we deal with it a great deal in our lives, don't we? There's another meaning of bitterness in the Bible, and the same word, the same background, and it means a state of extreme enmity against God. Now this is its meaning in Acts 23, where you'll remember that Peter confronted Simon the sorcerer, and he said, "I see that you are full of bitterness and captive to sin." Wow, what a state. He saw that by the Spirit. He just discerned it in Simon, the spiritual leader of the entire island where he was. And then a third meaning in the Bible, number 1 is a state of being vexed in your mind. Number 2 is a state of enmity against God. And the third one is a state of apostasy. That is, drawing away from God, a dangerous error or schism from your brothers, your family, your fellowship in the church, and so on. And this is again implied by Hebrews 12:15. See to it that nobody misses the grace of God within your fellowship, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile not only the person, but everybody else around him. So there's our definition of bitterness. Not a pretty picture. How do you root out bitterness? That's point number 2, rooting out bitterness. First of all, we're commanded by the Bible in this very text to do that. See to it, the Bible says, that you not allow it to take root and grow. Get rid of it. God requires that we root out bitterness, number 1, in our own lives, but number 2, in our fellowship, in the congregation that we are a part of. We need to get it up and out so that it not defile the whole body. It has a way like yeast or leaven of just pervading a whole congregation of people, a whole family of people, if one person allows it to grow. So not only are we commanded to do it, but let's look at a few of the fruits of bitterness. Number 1 is anger. I lived for a while with a person who was bitter. He had a root of bitterness in his life. and nothing would tick him off. I mean, just the slightest little scratch against the way he was flowing was enough to make him fly into a rage of anger and storm out of the house. And it left everybody with their mouths open, wondering what in the world was wrong. What did we do to cause that? Well, we didn't do anything. It came up because that root was in there. Wrath is another. Wrath, that's not just anger, but it's more than anger. It's being on the other side of righteousness. It's doing things wrong because of the way you feel on the inside. Slander is an expression of it. Hatred and malice. What is malice? The desire to see people suffer, to see them hurt like you're hurting. That's what bitterness does. Now, good news is that we can track the stages of the development of bitterness in a person's life. And experts have determined that there are 8 discernible stages in the development of bitterness in a person's life, or in a family, or in a church, or other situation. I want to put these on the board so that we can track them ourselves. So come with me to the board. Now let us realize that these stages begin small and grow and multiply. And when they do, it reminds us that it's better to catch them in the early stages. So if we could learn these stages, and we could spot them at a lesser stage or an early stage, it would be much easier for us to deal with it. First of all, the first stage of bitterness. Let's put our topic right here. Bitterness. Bitterness. Now, stage 1 of bitterness is oversensitive. Oversensitive. Now, this is not difficult to spot in people either. Oversensitive to verbal remarks, let us say. Oversensitive to actions or lack of actions. I remember once this person was so upset simply because after a victory of sorts in his business, no one congratulated him or told him how special that was. We just didn't do it. We felt it, we saw it, we realized it, but we didn't say the right words. And he then began to be oversensitive to that, and they don't care about me. And this thing just began to grow on him. And sometimes an innocent remark that could be taken wrongly by such a person. Oh, that happens so many times, and sends this person then into a deep grieving and into a deep distress. The second stage is hurt feelings. Hurt feelings. Now, these manifest in so many and varied ways, but if they are left unpurged or undealt with, they can continue to multiply and to grow. Bitterness grows in isolation. And these folks tend then to get alone and try to sort the thing out themselves and don't say anything about it. But instead, they will move shortly to the third stage. And all of these are internal stages. Internal stages. I'm going to put INT right here. These 3 are internal. And you've got to be sensitive if you're going to catch it, because it'll get by you if you're not sensitive. But the third stage is repulsive feelings. You just don't want to be around somebody. Repulsive feelings toward a person or a group that makes you feel grieved or distressed on the inside. The sight of that person, for this person who is harboring bitterness, is repulsive. And so consequently, everything that the imagination can produce turns negative. Now, there's a bridge right here. There's a bridge in this development process. A bridge in the development process. And that I've marked number 4. And it is this one, retaining wounds. Retaining wounds. And frequently talking about them. And then talking about them frequently. What you're really doing when you talk about them is you're asking for help. You're really seeking help, but the help is not coming because you are doing it so defensively. Retaining wounds and talking about them. This is the red meat of bitterness right here. Retaining wounds and talking about them. They hurt me. They did this to me. They caused me to feel this way or that. Now, the next are external stages. Now, by that I mean things that you begin as a bitter person to do. Not just to feel now, but actions that you begin to take. The first one is that you alienate these people. Alienate. Sometimes it's even family members. And you just refuse to go to where they are. You don't want them around you anymore. So you alienate that person or that group of people. Beforehand, they were your friends. You loved them. And you wanted to be around them. But because of the retained wounds, you alienate them. And then 6, you verbally slander them. You begin to talk negatively about them. You pick out and find all of the wrong things that are in people's lives. And they're there. And if you're looking for them and you are cynical, a cynic, that's the word for dog. And a cynic is someone who's always sniffing around for something that's rotten. Sniffing around for something that you can criticize. And then number 7 is your inability, even as a Christian, to pray for this person or this group. Inability to pray for him or her. Now, then you are out and away from the person or the group that you believe has caused your bitterness. And that brings you then to the final result. And here's the final result. And that's the 8th stage. You actually then become like the one whom you believe has caused your bitterness. You become like the one you despise. What a place to arrive. But there it is, bitterness. Bitterness as it comes full blown in a person's life. And this is not even the greatest tragedy of it. One more time, let's go back to the board. Here's what happens then. Number 8 characterizes you. And so then you become oversensitive. as a lifestyle to others and everybody. And this leads then to a whole new set of hurt feelings. The scene changes, but the demeanor goes on. And you're caught then in this vicious cycle of bitterness. It's a great tragedy that we see too often, isn't it? Well, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with your hurt? It's not wrong to feel hurt. Sometimes we are hurt. However, how you deal with your hurt, as the life of Jacob is put in the Bible to teach us, makes all the difference in what happens to you as a result of that hurt. Hurt will either make you bitter or it can make you better if you deal with it properly. So in order to come towards our ability to deal with it rightly, let's look at the 8 characteristics of bitterness. 8 characteristics. It took us 8 stages to get here. Now, let's look at the 8 characteristics of bitterness. And we'll get a fresh board here and take a good look at these 8 characteristics. Number 1, a bitter person cares very little. He cares little for the people he or she holds bitterness against. So your caring goes away. In fact, it'll begin to grow into worse than not caring. If you don't care about someone, then you are very touchy about how you interact with them and they with you. It doesn't take much for somebody that you don't like or that you have something against to irritate you further. And a bitter person then is ungrateful for this person or anything this person might do positively. You're always sniffing out the rot in the gift. And number 4, a bitter person will engage in criticism, harsh criticism of that person every chance he gets, regardless of what that person is trying to do. He may be trying to cure the thing, but the criticism will be there. The fault finding will be there. And it turns into grudges. These are characteristics of someone who is hurt. He holds a grudge, finds it difficult to forgive, lets the sun go down on seething wrath. A bitter person then becomes sulky, sulks, stubborn. And then, number 7, a bitter person will help no one and complains when asked to be a helper. Complains when asked to help. And then finally, here's the catcher. He's the victim of all kinds of mood swings. And they are not just mood swings often, but they are extreme highs and extreme lows. Euphoria, despair. Now there are characteristics of people who are hurt. They're wounded. A wounded person, Shakespeare said, it takes a small thing to harm a wounded man, he said. A small thing can hurt a wounded person because they live on the edge of caring little about others, touchy, ungrateful, filled with criticism, carrying grudges, sulky, complaining, and with myriads of mood swings. Now, I know that we've all experienced this. Some of us have experienced this in our own selves. We have been the bitter one. But most of us, all of us, I would say, have experienced it in some measure in someone around us, perhaps someone in our family for whom we have a great deal of love and care and concern. But bitterness like this progresses, and you can see that there is progressiveness even there. But three things I'd like to say about the progressiveness of bitterness. Number one, bitterness keeps getting worse the longer it's allowed to grow undealt with. You have got to deal with bitterness. It doesn't get any better by itself. You've got to have help in dealing with bitterness. Number two, bitterness hurts not only the holder, but everybody in the way, everybody around. A bitter person has got to clean out the hard drive, or he'll suffer serious spiritual and emotional consequences. And so will those around him, his children, his grandchildren, his spouse. And number three, bitterness produces the sin of unforgiveness. Now, the Bible doesn't say that bitterness is a sin, but unforgiveness is a sin. Bitterness is a condition. It's a state, and it can be cured with help. But one of its major markings is the sin of unforgiveness. Spiritually, unforgiveness breaks God's commandment to forgive. And therefore, it sets one at a distance from His healing and His cleansing presence in our lives. Emotionally, unforgiveness creates a focus toward the one who did the hurt, so that it results in the one hurt becoming like the one who did the hurt. So it's a vicious cycle. And until it's dealt with, bitterness is a destroyer. Well, I want to talk in our next session about how to deal with bitterness, how to rid your life of bitterness, or the life of someone else whom you know and care about that you see caught in the throes of bitterness. Remember, bitterness begins as a root. Someone hurts you, or you perceive that someone hurts you or negates you, and you allow that thing to get inside. And unless you can get it out, get it up and get it out, it's going to grow. And then it will flower. It will flower. And as it flowers out in anger and strife and hate and ugliness of all kinds. So how do you get rid of it? There's one way to get rid of it, and one way only. Now, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and don't claim to be, but I am a student of this Word. And regardless of all of the tactics, techniques, until they use the tool of forgiveness, they're not going to work. Now, in our next session, I want to deal with a scriptural analysis of unforgiveness, and then come to how to use forgiveness to heal bitterness. So I hope that you'll join me in the next hour. In the meantime, God bless you, and I'll see you next time.
This has been brought to you by Ron Cottle Ministries. For more information, please call us at 706-256-0100, extension 217, or visit our website, roncottleministries.com.